Presented from the Aishin Broadcast Studio at Babcock's Media.
Welcome to the AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today, our guest is Bruce Osborne from Allstate. Welcome.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you, and we've got a lot of exciting topics to talk about. First one's traffic. Every dealer wants more traffic, more people walking through the door.
Absolutely.
What can they do?
Well, I think, right now in the industry, dealers are looking for any solution that will drive traffic back into the showroom, whether it's retention from the service drive, from sales to service, service to sales. They're looking for parts opportunities. We see it time and time again. I think one of the biggest challenges dealers have is finding those mechanisms that will drive traffic back into either into the showroom or into the service drive. And sometimes they'll use a why buy here program, some of them will use a long-term limited warranty as a differentiating factor, buy from my dealership versus somebody else. Some do maintenance plans. I've seen some combinations where they're taking some of the bundled F&I products and using that as a way to try to differentiate themselves and draw people in. But I also see a lot of dealers now who are they're looking at maintenance programs. They're looking at any kind of program that will bring the customer back into their facility. And I think that's one of the keys that we've seen out there in the industry. It's how can I'm a dealer, I have good foot traffic, how do I take it to the next level? And sometimes the products that you sell can gratefully impact that one way or the other.
Actually, that leads me directly to the next topic I want to discuss. Once you get them in, what can dealers do to make sure that they're absolutely maximizing like every opportunity, every time, every day?
So I ask this question of people all the time. I'm like, when's the last time you've been in a dealership? And I'll ask you that question. To buy a car. I know you're in dealerships all the time, but to buy a car. The last time you bought a car, what was that experience like?
Actually, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. My wife and I bought a Honda Accord hybrid.
Okay.
And we went in to look at one car, and they had this one on the showroom. She said, "I love it," and we drove it, bought it, and it was actually.
Did you have a knowledgeable salesperson, somebody who knew the product?
No. I had to look up a lot of stuff on my phone because they didn't know anything about the hybrid.
That was the experience that I had. My wife, during COVID, my wife had a lease that was up, and we went out and we shopped, and we went to probably half a dozen dealerships in our local area. And the thing that really blew me away, because I came up on the retail side of the automotive business, the thing that really blew me away was how little salespeople actually knew about their own product. Because I found for myself that I could spend 20 minutes online brushing up on some of the features and benefits of those products, and I knew more about the car than the salesperson who does it every day. And to me, we talk about dealers finding ways to drive traffic into the showroom, so they do. And they spend X number of dollars, it could be $400, it could be $500, $600 to get a customer into the showroom. And then you blow it because you have a poorly trained individual doing the meet and greet, actually talking to that customer. And I think one of the biggest challenges that I see right now in the industry is there's very little training and development. There's very little, you hire a salesperson into the showroom and right away anymore they turn them loose. When I started in the business, I spent 2 weeks, basically 2 weeks in a training room, conference room, learning the road to the sale, the steps to a sale. And I feel like, for years, OEMs kind of took that. They were doing that type of training. They were paying for or subsidizing that training at the dealership level. I just don't see a lot of dealers that invest that time into their people nowadays. And the shame of it is you spend all that money to draw a customer into your showroom, and then they have a bad experience right off the bat. And they go down the road and they buy from somebody else. They run into somebody who actually does understand how to build value in the product, how to build value in a vehicle. And, I watch traffic come through showrooms every day and have a bad experience and go somewhere else and buy. And if I'm a dealer, the first thing I would do is implement a training program. Every time I bring on a new salesperson, a new F&I person, they go through a process, they understand the road to a sale. They know how to present product and how to demonstrate that product to the consumer.
I was kind of lucky. My first sales job selling cars,
Yeah.
the general manager of the dealership, he had a great sales process, and we trained on it, and
Yeah.
we practiced it. And I mean, if you didn't do a service walk, you weren't getting numbers. I mean,
Absolutely.
like it was. I mean, but it worked out really well. I mean,
Yeah.
like you said, a week in or 2 weeks in, you had a process and you just followed it, and it worked.
Well, those dealers that do have those processes in place, and you mentioned a service walk. I mean, what a way to build value into your dealership. Not only that, we talk about how do you retain customers from front to back. Because I think the numbers, years ago I worked on an OEM program, and maintenance was part of the program, and the retention rate that we had at the time was like 21% from sales to service.
Wow.
The customers that they retained. And the drawback to that is you start thinking, wow, I mean, so you're basically telling me that the other 79 people out of 100 that came through my dealership don't come back to me for service at all? Why? I mean, did we not do a good job building value in who we are and what we do? And I think that's another part of that whole process, is if you're teaching salespeople, how to do the proper, how to use the steps to a sale. So they do a meet and greet, they do an interview, they actually do a walk around presentation to a consumer, which I'm going to tell you today, most salespeople probably have never done a walk around. They don't go on the demo drive with the customer. They just kind of sit back and let it happen. And then when it comes time to negotiate the deal, they don't have the relationship with the consumer. They haven't earned the right to ask for the sale, in my opinion. And I think that's part of the drawback that we see in the industry. And then, the something as simple as a service walk. I mean, my gosh, I mean, you're buying a car, you're spending, the average price of a car these days, I mean, it's hard now to find anything with any equipment that's not 45, 50 grand and above.
Yeah.
So you're buying these expensive vehicles. As a consumer, don't you want to know that the place you're buying it from can take care of you if you have a problem down the road? And to me, I think that service walk is a great way to build value in your dealership, to build value in what you do. You can talk about ties to the community. You can talk about involvement, and you show the customer, you get the customer comfortable with that process. And I think that's a huge factor that gets missed quite a bit. It's something really simple. We were required to do a service walk as well. I mean, it was a big selling point. I mean, I could walk in, I could show them the write-up area. I'd walk back and show them a little bit. We didn't go in the shop, but we could look in the shop, and we showed them the number of lifts and the volume, and they could see how busy the service department was. Mm-hmm. And it really helped build value in who we were as a dealer group and how we would present to customers.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about negative equity, because it's a problem it's always been a problem, but it's a big problem right now. And we have, through the pandemic and through supply chain issues, we've got a lot of customers out there that are so far into the weeds that it's really hard to put a deal together. Are there any tools or tactics that you know of that can help dealers to save these people?
I think a lot of it's going to have to come from the OEMs. It's going to have to come from the manufacturers. We're going to see it in incentives. Mm-hmm. Ideally, what I think would really help the industry is to bring back some of the lease incentives that we had in the past. One of the things we did during COVID was we really stretched the customer out. And by that I mean simply that we didn't finance a lot of 60-month loans during the pandemic. We did a lot of 72, 84, and for crying out loud today, even 96-month loans. And not only did we took the customer, we charged them MSRP, and in some cases MSRP plus, then we extended the term. So we've created this perfect storm for the customer to be what we would call upside down in the industry or have negative equity. And the only way I really see us digging out is we'd probably have to see programs like we did in like 2010, 2011, where we were pulling people out of some of those vehicles from one of the prior financial crises. Yeah. I think back to part of my experience in the industry was 9/11. And, we saw after 9/11, a lot of OEMs threw huge rebates and incentives out there to try to drive traffic, which was great at the time. But 3 or 4 years later, we found a lot of people were upside down. They had a lot of negative equity. And it really took incentives from the OEMs to kind of drive them out of that hole. For dealers, I would be looking at every opportunity I can right now, especially with used car prices being where they are, that maybe you can pull some of those people out of those vehicles and take advantage of some of the programs that are out there now. But you really have to be managing your book of business as a dealer group. I mean, are your salespeople going back through their customer base? Are they looking at the deals that they sold over the last 4 or 5 years? And are they identifying opportunities where maybe, hey, here's a guy who's got a 3-year-old vehicle. It's probably got good miles. I remember when he bought the car, he told me he was a 10, 12,000 mile a year person. So this vehicle might be worth a pretty good amount right now by comparison. So how do I draw that customer back in? I think a lot of it is grassroots. It's salespeople working their customer base and trying to drive traffic back into the showroom. And then again, I think it will take some incentives from the OEMs to really erase that negative equity.
We kind of discussed how, salespeople are, they're not trained right. And, they're not even doing walkarounds. They're not doing service walks. You just described a pretty, I guess, in-depth process of looking back at customers and figuring out who might be in a situation where we can move them ahead. How do you train that? Like how do you take a sales team and get them up to that level where they can do that type of tactic?
So I think it's one of the things that we try to bring value to our independent agent channel. So, me with my division with Allstate Dealer Services, we are an F&I product provider. We're really focused on the F&I market and what happens when after the customer makes the decision to buy the vehicle, they sit down in the F&I office. What does that process look like? That's where our number one focus is. But I believe that for us as a company to really be successful, we have to find other ways to bring value to our agent partners and ultimately to our dealer partners. And one of the ways I think that we can provide a lot of value is to add some of these training curriculums that typically they're not really focused on F&I, but they're focused on how do we help our partners succeed. So one of the things that we've done is we've developed it's a road to the sale curriculum that we can deliver. We can either deliver it to a dealership, to a dealer partner, or we can give it to our independent agents who then can go and present it to the dealer. So we provide train the trainer training, a lot of T's there.
Yeah.
Probably way too many, but we provide that kind of training for our independent agents who then go and deliver those classes to the dealership personnel. Or, we'll partner with an independent agent. We'll go into a big dealer group and maybe we'll put 40 or 50 people in a room. Maybe we'll do 3 or 4 sessions and we teach that road to the sale. And it's not anything new. It's basic stuff. It's basic blocking and tackling. I mean, when you started in retail, you probably learned a lot of the same tactics that I did. And the first step is obviously, how do you do a meet and greet? You're walking up and talking to the customer. I've watched people who are absolutely afraid to go and approach a customer on a lot.
Yeah.
It seems like a basic thing, but there is an art to doing it without coming across as being pushy and trying to inject yourself into a moment where a customer might just want to look at the inventory and get a feel for what's on the lot. There's a tactic to it, but it starts with that meet and greet. It goes into, are we doing an interview with the customer? And by an interview, I'm not meaning where we grill a guy with 20 or 30 questions, but we want to find out a little bit about what's important to them. What are their driving habits? What did they like about the car they have now? What are they looking for in the next vehicle? And then that helps us really build a product presentation. We understand that some people, when they come into a dealership, they're very much in tune with the performance features of a vehicle. Horsepower, torque, that means everything to that buyer. Well, if I got a horsepower torque person, I'm not going to spend 20 minutes talking about safety features. And that's one of the mistakes that we watch people make constantly. I was talking to a coworker of mine, my boss actually, and she said when she went to buy a car a few years ago, the guy really talked a lot about child safety seats. She's like, I don't have kids. I'm not sure why he went down that path. He didn't ask if I had kids, but he went into this big presentation on something that doesn't even matter. And she goes, guess what? I didn't buy from that dealership. And I'm like, well, that doesn't surprise me because you want a targeted approach. You want to feel like as a customer, you're being heard and that you're catering the presentation to that customer's needs. That's not what happens a lot of times. But if we can kind of dial that in, dial those presentations in, I think that's a big part of it. But for us as an organization, it's about value adds. We feel like everything we do should add value to our agent partners and ultimately to our dealer partners, and training is just one piece of that.
Presented from the Ishin Broadcast Studio at Babcox Media.
I do want to ask you about, I have an Allstate question for you.
Sure.
Tell me about, what is One Allstate? Tell me what that is.
Okay, so it's something we're working on. It's actually a work in process right now. The ideal is that Allstate as a company, I mean, you know, we're a massive company, 50,000 employees worldwide, you know, one of the top personal lines insurance companies out there in the industry. We have a lot of divisions and a lot of products. A lot of people don't realize all the stuff that Allstate's into. For example, right now, if you go into Walmart or Home Depot and you buy something, they're going to offer you a service contract on that. That's actually an Allstate product.
Oh, wow.
So we have a lot of different divisions out there, and we're trying to find or identify ways to where we can help a dealer solve almost every insurance need that they have. And that's what the One Allstate approach is ultimately about. It's how do we go to a dealer partner of ours and identify opportunities for us to build, customize, install products that will actually help the dealership run more efficiently, run smoother, be more profitable. And so we're looking at different areas that Allstate could get into. I mean, it could be, and don't hold me to this because like I said, we're still working on it, but you know, we may go down the garage keeper's path. We may get into some of the other insurance lines that are within a dealership. Right now, our first step is to gather the information and find out what do dealers really need? What are they looking for? What matters to a dealer? Because without that information, you know, we're no better than the salesperson who's talking about car safety seats to somebody who doesn't have children.
Yeah. You had mentioned you had 50,000 employees.
Yes.
And recently you guys have gone all remote.
Yeah, we have.
How did that work out? Like, what did that look like, that transition?
Well, I think initially there were some challenges. I mean, as any company experienced when they went, most everybody went remote during COVID. We all had challenges that occurred to that. I think for us, the biggest thing was we wanted to make sure that the end consumer, so the customer who actually drives off the dealership's lot, he's bought an Allstate service contract, an Allstate gap, a complete protection, which is a tire and wheel, key, ding and dent, windshield type of product. We want to make sure that that customer ultimately is taken care of. So the first thing was to make sure that our claims operation was stood up properly. So that was a challenge that we had to get that really established. And we use a lot of different tools internally to make sure that that happens. But one of the things that I've noticed is that our customer experience over the last couple of years, we went through a little bit of a learning curve, but has definitely gone in the right direction. You know, right now we're running like a 96% satisfaction score, which is, you know, really pretty high, pretty strong for the industry. But we had challenges when it comes to that. The one thing that being fully remote has allowed us to do, though, is we can identify talent wherever we can find talent. You know, prior to this, you know, our operation was based in Jacksonville, Florida. We found a lot of really good people, talented people in the Jacksonville market. When it comes to claims, though, you're dealing with a finite pool of individuals, people who have experience, you know, either working on vehicles or experience in a service department at a dealership. And sometimes being able to go and pull people from other markets and have them work remotely has allowed us to attract much better talent. We still have the core of our group is still based near where the office was, but one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of the leadership personnel, a lot of the newer claims people that we've been able to add, we're just finding talent. You know, we don't have to worry about location. We can actually identify very talented individuals, bring them into the company and roll forward from that. There have been a lot of organizations out there that from a claims perspective did see a downturn in service levels.
Yeah.
And I think all of them have started to see it rebound. They've learned lessons. Some companies have brought people back in and now they're working from an office as opposed to being remote. But I think for us, it's if we're able to keep our net promoter score, our customer satisfaction score very high, it just allows us to hire talent wherever we can find talent.
Well, we've covered a lot, and one Allstate, going remote. I mean, there's a lot of changes are happening in your business.
Yes.
What's next?
Well, I think in our industry, I mean, obviously we've seen a lot of changes in the vehicle mix. We went from, does anybody in the U.S. build a car anymore? I mean, none of the domestics really do. It's if you're looking for a car, you go Honda, you go Toyota, you go the Asian or the Korean import route, or you go German with the Audis, the BMWs. It's been some challenges, I think, out there in the industry when it comes to like what's happened and what's changed. We're seeing EVs that have come into the marketplace. That's really changed the dealer's philosophy, strategy. A lot of dealers have leaned into that. They've invested a lot of money into those facilities. From our perspective, I think what's next out there is how do we help dealers wrap their entire facility in Allstate branded products? And I think that's where we're going. That's what One Allstate is all about. That's what we're looking to do. And again, it goes back to one of the points that I made earlier, and that is how do we add value to our agents and how do we add value to our dealers? I think that's one way we can do it. We can give them a fully branded solution. I mean, one of the great things about working for a company like Allstate is, I mean, people recognize that name and logo. They know what the hands mean.
Yeah.
The interesting thing that we see out there in the marketplace, as a person who did F&I for 6 years, I can tell you that the name on the contract, it does matter with the end consumer. There's a confidence level that they get. And the only thing that I think that we really can compare ourselves to is the brand, the Allstate brand on the corner of that contract. That logo is almost equivalent to the OEM brand. Mm-hmm. Customer comes in, look, part of my experience in my days was Saturn. I worked in a Saturn dealership for a number of years, and people came in, they bought the brand and they loved it. And at the time we were selling Saturn service plans. And I remember I'd flip the service contract around and the name gave us instant credibility. Allstate does the same thing in the F&I office. And that's where I think the brand has such a big impact. And if we can wrap more dealer-based products, and they may not be customer-facing, they may be dealer-facing products. If we can do more of that type of stuff with the brand, I think the credibility that gives us and the way we can wrap a dealership, nobody else in the industry has the ability to do that.
Bruce, I appreciate you coming in today. Is there anything more you'd like to share with our audience?
Oh, I'm just really glad to be here. I was really glad to run into a fellow Bengals Bearcats fan.
Who day?
That's always important. I see a lot of things out there in our industry that are very positive right now. I think product at this point, what the dealers are selling, the actual vehicles that they have in inventory, I don't think we've ever seen technology like we have in a car today. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, I'm always blown away when I go in and I get into an older vehicle, because I remember my first car, which was a 1976 Ford Granada, 4-door, so it was sexy as all get out. But I remember that car. I had crank windows, I had push button locks, didn't have air conditioning, had an AM radio. It was pretty basic. There weren't a lot of electronics on that vehicle. And now I get into a car today, and you've got all the lane sensing technology, you've got the variable speed cruise control systems, you've got all your cameras, all your sensors, your windshield sensors. It's just amazing to me, the technology that goes into a vehicle nowadays. Mm-hmm. The issue that creates for us as a product provider is simply that, we see vehicles totaled out much more rapidly nowadays than we ever did before. We see on service contracts claims, because those sensors are not cheap to fix. And, if I were looking at a customer today and saying, look at all the technology on a vehicle, there are other products that you should consider from an F&I perspective. And I think that's the biggest thing, is it's getting our F&I producers to talk about the value in those products and how they ultimately protect the customer. I mean, that's what Allstate is all about, is ultimately how do we protect the customer? And that belief goes from Whether you buy a personal lines auto policy, whether you buy a homeowner's policy, whether you go to Home Depot and you buy a snow blower and a service contract on the snow blower, whether you go to a dealership and you buy a car and you buy one of the dealer services contracts, it's all about taking care of the customer. That's where we focus. That's what our Allstate's made their living off of for the past 100 years, and I think that's where we'll continue to go in the future.
Great. Well, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to join us for this AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today, our guest has been Bruce Osborne from Allstate. We hope to see you again on a future episode. This one's Over the Curb and Burning Gas.